For 20 years, he had been repairing civilian helicopters. Quiet, experienced technician, until that young pilot noticed his emergency landing procedures were at combat rescue level, and the truth he learned. This man was a former pararescue specialist who had saved 47 pilots under enemy fire. Welcome to Human Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden heroism, life-saving expertise, and the wings that bridge military service with civilian safety, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today, and if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these stories alive. The hangar at Skyline Aviation Services sat on the edge of Phoenix Regional Airport, a modest facility specializing in civilian helicopter maintenance and repair. The corrugated metal building housed 2 service bays, a parts inventory, and an office that always smelled faintly of coffee and hydraulic fluid. Michael "Mike" Sullivan, 58 years old, had owned and operated the business for 20 years. Tall and lean, with graying temples and calloused hands permanently stained with grease, Mike had earned a reputation as one of the most skilled helicopter mechanics in Arizona. His clients ranged from news stations and medical transport services to wealthy ranchers and tourism companies operating scenic flight services. Mike's approach to helicopter maintenance was methodical and thorough. He treated every aircraft that entered his hangar as if lives depended on its perfect operation, because they did. Whether servicing a news helicopter, a medical evacuation aircraft, or a luxury touring chopper, Mike applied the same exacting standards and systematic procedures. A helicopter is only as good as its last maintenance, Mike would tell clients who questioned his attention to detail. In the air, there's no pulling over to the side of the road. His reputation was built on reliability and precision. In 20 years of operation, no aircraft serviced by Mike had ever experienced a mechanical failure. Pilots trusted him implicitly, often traveling hundreds of miles to have their helicopters maintained at Skyline Aviation. What clients didn't know was that Mike's obsessive attention to detail and systematic approach to aircraft maintenance came from experience, where mechanical failure meant death, not just inconvenience. On a hot Tuesday afternoon in September, the routine at Skyline Aviation was shattered by an emergency radio call. A Bell 206 tourist helicopter had experienced engine problems during a scenic flight over the Sonoran Desert and was attempting an emergency landing at the airport. Mike dropped his tools and ran outside as the crippled helicopter approached the runway. The aircraft was clearly in distress, black smoke trailing from the engine compartment, the distinct sound of mechanical failure audible even from the ground. Standing nearby was Jake Rodriguez, a 26-year-old commercial helicopter pilot who had brought his aircraft in for routine maintenance. Jake watched as the emergency helicopter made its approach, expecting to witness a potentially catastrophic crash. "This doesn't look good," Jake said to Mike. "Engine's clearly failing and he's coming in hot." Mike studied the approaching aircraft with intense focus. "Pilot's doing everything right," he said calmly. "Maintaining rotor RPM, managing the descent rate, setting up for auto-rotation." "Auto-rotation?" Jake was surprised. "How can you tell from here?" "Watch the rotor disc angle. Listen to the engine pitch changes." He's following textbook emergency procedures. As they watched, the helicopter executed a perfect auto-rotation landing, using the aircraft's forward momentum to keep the rotors spinning and provide lift even with engine failure. The landing was smooth and controlled, with no damage to the aircraft beyond the original engine problem. "That was incredible flying," Jake said, impressed by the pilot's skill. "Good training saves lives," Mike replied. "That pilot knew exactly what to do when everything went wrong." Jake noticed something unusual in Mike's commentary. His observations were technically sophisticated and tactically precise, more like those of a flight instructor or experienced pilot than a ground-based mechanic. "Mike, you seem to know a lot about emergency flight procedures for a mechanic." Mike was quiet for a moment. You pick things up over the years, but Jake sensed there was more to the story. As the emergency helicopter was towed to Mike's hangar for inspection, Jake offered to help with the preliminary assessment. The engine had suffered a catastrophic failure. Internal components had seized, causing the loss of power that forced the emergency landing. Mike's approach to the inspection revealed his unusual depth of knowledge about helicopter systems and emergency procedures. Engine failure at this altitude could have been fatal if the pilot hadn't maintained proper airspeed during auto-rotation, Mike explained as he examined the damaged components. Too slow and you lose rotor RPM. Too fast and you can't arrest the descent rate. You talk like you've seen this before, Jake observed. Engine failures aren't uncommon in helicopters. The key is pilot training and aircraft maintenance. Mike's analysis was thorough and systematic. He didn't just identify the mechanical failure. He reconstructed the entire emergency sequence, explaining how the pilot's decisions had prevented a crash. See this bearing wear pattern. Engine was giving warning signs for weeks. Pilot probably felt vibrations, heard unusual noises. Should have brought it in for inspection earlier. How do you know so much about helicopter emergencies? Jake asked directly. Mike looked at the young pilot carefully. What makes you think I know more than any other mechanic would? Because your analysis sounds like someone who's been in emergency situations, not just read about them in manuals. Mike continued his inspection without answering, but Jake noticed that his examination procedures were more systematic and thorough than standard civilian maintenance protocols. Chapter 4. The Revelation. 2 days later, Jake returned to pick up his helicopter after its scheduled maintenance. He found Mike in the hangar, working alone on the emergency landing aircraft. The damaged engine had been completely disassembled, its components spread across a large workbench. How's the repair coming? Jake asked. Engine's totaled, Mike replied, but the airframe is fine. Just need to swap in a rebuilt power plant. Jake watched Mike work, noting the precision and efficiency of his movements. Every tool had its place, every procedure followed a logical sequence. It reminded him of military maintenance protocols. Mike, can I ask you something personal? Mike looked up from his work. Depends on the question. Were you ever in the military? Your approach to helicopter maintenance seems more systematic than most civilian shops. Mike set down his tools and studied Jake for a long moment. Why do you want to know? Because I served 4 years in the Army before becoming a commercial pilot. Your procedures, your knowledge of emergency situations, the way you analyze aircraft problems. It reminds me of military aviation standards. Mike wiped his hands on a rag and made a decision that would change both their lives. Staff Sergeant Michael Sullivan, United States Air Force, Pararescue Specialist, 24 years of service, retired 2004. Jake felt a chill of recognition. Air Force Pararescue, the elite special operations unit known as PJs, were legendary in military aviation. These were the specialists who rescued downed pilots in hostile territory, performed combat search and rescue, and operated in the most dangerous conditions imaginable. You were a PJ, that these others may live, Mike said quietly, reciting the pararescue motto. Everything clicked into place for Jake. Mike's obsessive attention to aircraft safety, his encyclopedic knowledge of emergency procedures, his systematic approach to maintenance, it all made sense now. That's why you know emergency procedures so well. You've been in situations where helicopter failures meant life or death. More times than I care to remember. Over the following weeks, Jake found himself spending more time at Mike's hangar, drawn by curiosity about the mechanic's extraordinary background. Mike was initially reluctant to share details about his military service, but Jake's genuine interest and respect gradually drew out the stories. I enlisted in 1980, right out of high school. Mike began one evening as they worked together on a routine maintenance job. Wanted to be a pilot, but ended up in pararescue. Best decision I never made consciously. Mike explained that pararescue training was among the most demanding in the military. The pipeline to become a PJ lasted nearly 2 years and had an attrition rate over 90%. Those who completed the training became elite specialists capable of operating in any environment, air, land, or sea. What kind of missions did you do? Personnel recovery, primarily. When aircraft went down in hostile territory, when special operations teams needed medical evacuation, when civilians were trapped in disaster zones. That was our job. Mike described operations spanning 4 conflicts: the end of the Cold War, Panama, the Gulf War, and finally Afghanistan. Each deployment had brought new challenges and refined his understanding of aircraft operations under extreme conditions. The thing about pararescue is that you're not just a medic or just a rescue specialist. You have to understand aircraft systems, navigation, communications, medical procedures, combat tactics, everything. Because when you're extracting people from bad situations, you're often the only qualified person available. How many rescues did you perform over 24 years? Mike was quiet for a long moment. Officially, 47 pilots, aircrew, and special operations personnel. Unofficially, there were operations that didn't make it into official records. Jake was stunned by the number. Each rescue represented someone's life saved, often under combat conditions with limited resources and extreme time pressure. As their professional relationship deepened into friendship, Mike shared more detailed accounts of his military experience. The story that had the greatest impact on Jake involved a rescue operation in Afghanistan in 23. We got a call that a Chinook helicopter had gone down in the Hindu Kush Mountains, Mike began. Mechanical failure, not enemy action, but they were in Taliban territory with winter weather moving in. Mike described a complex rescue operation involving multiple aircraft, challenging terrain, and deteriorating weather conditions. The crashed helicopter had 12 personnel aboard, 8 passengers and 4 crew members. Some were injured, all were stranded in hostile territory. The crash site was at 11,000 feet elevation, surrounded by peaks, with weather closing in fast. Normal rescue procedures weren't going to work. Mike's team had to develop an improvised rescue plan using equipment and techniques adapted for extreme conditions. The operation required 3 separate helicopter insertions over 2 days, with PJs remaining on the ground to provide medical care and security. We couldn't get a standard rescue helicopter into the crash site because of altitude and weather. Had to use a different approach. Insert teams on foot, provide medical care, and extract personnel individually using specialized equipment. Did everyone survive? 11 out of 12. Lost 1 crew member to internal injuries before we could get him to medical facilities, but the other 11 made it home. Mike's account revealed the complexity of combat rescue operations. Success required not just courage, but technical expertise, improvisation, and systematic problem-solving under extreme pressure. That operation taught me that aircraft maintenance isn't just about following procedures. It's about understanding how systems work under stress, what happens when things go wrong, and how to prevent failures that could kill people. Jake was fascinated by Mike's transition from military rescue operations to civilian helicopter maintenance. After 24 years of high-stress rescue operations, why did you choose to work on civilian helicopters rather than continue in aviation? Mike considered the question carefully. I thought about becoming a commercial pilot or working for an airline. Had the qualifications, the experience, but I realized that my real expertise wasn't just in flying. It was in understanding how aircraft systems work and fail. Mike explained that his military experience had given him insights into helicopter maintenance that most civilian mechanics never developed. He understood not just how to repair aircraft, but how to prevent the kinds of failures that could cause emergencies. In pararescue, you see the consequences of mechanical failure up close. You rescue people whose aircraft broke down at the worst possible moment. That gives you a different perspective on maintenance. So you decided to focus on keeping aircraft from breaking down rather than rescuing people when they did? Exactly. Prevention is better than rescue. If I can keep civilian helicopters properly maintained, maybe fewer people will need rescuing. Mike's civilian helicopter service was built on military standards of maintenance and safety. Every procedure, every inspection, every repair was performed with the same attention to detail that had kept military aircraft operational in combat zones. The difference is that in military operations, you accept certain risks because the mission requires it. In civilian aviation, there's no mission important enough to justify taking unnecessary risks with aircraft safety. Word of Mike's military background gradually spread among the local aviation community. Pilots who learned about his pararescue experience began seeking his guidance on emergency procedures and aircraft safety. "Mike, would you be willing to provide some training on emergency procedures?" asked Captain Sarah Martinez, a medical helicopter pilot who flew for the Regional Trauma Center. "Your background could really help our crews." Mike was hesitant at first. "I'm a mechanic now, not an instructor." "But your experience with helicopter emergencies is exactly what we need. Most civilian pilots never train for the kinds of situations you've handled." After several requests, Mike agreed to develop an informal training program for local helicopter pilots. The program combined his military experience with civilian aviation requirements. Civilian emergency training focuses on normal failures under normal conditions, Mike explained to his first group of students. Military training prepares you for equipment failures under the worst possible circumstances. Mike's training program covered advanced auto-rotation techniques, emergency landing procedures, and aircraft systems management during failures. His military experience provided insights that civilian flight training typically didn't address. In combat rescue, we learned that there are no standard emergencies. Every situation is unique, and you have to adapt your procedures to circumstances. That flexibility can save your life in civilian aviation, too. 6 months after Jake first learned about Mike's background, they faced a real-world test of Mike's expertise. A medical helicopter en route to a trauma call experienced a catastrophic transmission failure while flying over mountainous terrain. The pilot, Captain Rodriguez, no relation to Jake, was a graduate of Mike's emergency procedures training. Following Mike's instruction, he immediately executed an auto-rotation landing in a small clearing surrounded by trees. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Life Flight 7, came the radio call. "We've had a transmission failure and executed an emergency landing approximately 15 miles northeast of the airport." Mike and Jake were in the hangar when the call came through. Mike immediately grabbed his emergency response kit, a collection of tools and equipment that most civilian mechanics didn't carry. "We need to get out there," Mike said. "If it's a transmission failure, they might need immediate assistance." Jake offered to fly Mike to the crash site in his helicopter. As they approached the location, they could see the disabled aircraft in a small clearing, surrounded by emergency vehicles that had reached the scene by road. "Good landing," Mike observed as they circled the site. Pilot put it down in the only safe area available. They landed nearby, and Mike immediately went to work assessing the aircraft. His evaluation was swift and professional. "Complete transmission failure," he confirmed. "Aircraft is grounded until we can arrange heavy lift transport to get it out of here." But Mike's most important contribution wasn't technical. It was confirming that the pilot had executed the emergency procedures perfectly. "Captain Rodriguez, that was textbook emergency handling," Mike told the pilot. "Your training saved lives today." "Your training saved lives," Rodriguez replied. "Everything you taught us about auto-rotation and emergency landings, that's what got us down safely." The successful emergency landing led to increased recognition of Mike's training program within the regional aviation community. The Federal Aviation Administration took notice, and Mike was invited to contribute to civilian emergency training standards. "Mr. Sullivan, your program has produced measurable improvements in emergency response outcomes," said FAA Inspector Janet Chen during a site visit. "We'd like to discuss incorporating some of your methods into standard civilian training protocols. Mike was honored but cautious. My experience is primarily military. I'm not sure how well it translates to civilian requirements. The results speak for themselves. Pilots trained in your program have successfully handled 3 separate emergency situations in the past year. That's an exceptional safety record. Mike's training program became a model for advanced civilian helicopter emergency procedures. His unique combination of military rescue experience and civilian maintenance expertise proved valuable for improving aviation safety. What you've done is bridge the gap between military and civilian aviation safety, Inspector Chen noted. Military procedures are often too complex for civilian use, but your program adapts the essential elements for civilian pilots. As Mike's reputation grew, he found himself consulted on helicopter safety issues far beyond his local area. His expertise was particularly valued for accident investigation and safety improvement recommendations. "Mike, we need your input on this accident report," said Chief Investigator Robert Hayes from the National Transportation Safety Board. "The failure mode is similar to something you might have encountered in military operations." Mike's analysis of civilian helicopter accidents was informed by his extensive experience with aircraft failures under extreme conditions. His recommendations often identified systemic issues that other investigators missed. "In military operations, we learned that most aircraft failures aren't single-point events," Mike explained to the NTSB team. "There's usually a chain of small problems that culminate in a major failure. Prevention requires identifying and addressing the early warning signs." Mike's contributions to aviation safety extended beyond his local training program. His insights influenced national safety standards and accident prevention protocols. "Your military experience gives you a perspective that civilian aviation really needs," Chief Investigator Hayes told him. "You understand how aircraft systems behave under stress in ways that most people never see." Jake's relationship with Mike evolved from curiosity about his background to genuine mentorship in aviation safety and professionalism. "Mike, what's the most important thing you learned from your military experience that applies to civilian aviation?" "That your job isn't just about your own performance," Mike replied. "In pararescue, success was measured by bringing everyone home safely. In civilian aviation, success is measured by preventing emergencies from happening in the first place." Mike's mentorship helped Jake develop a more systematic approach to aviation safety and emergency preparedness. His military perspective provided insights that civilian training typically didn't cover. "In military aviation, we planned for worst-case scenarios because we operated in hostile environments. Civilian aviation is safer, but the principles are the same. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best." "How do you maintain that level of preparedness without becoming paranoid?" "By understanding that preparedness and paranoia are different things. Preparedness is based on knowledge and training. Paranoia is based on fear. Training eliminates fear by giving you confidence in your ability to handle emergencies." As Mike approached retirement age, he began working on a project to preserve and transfer his knowledge to the next generation of helicopter mechanics and pilots. "I want to document the lessons I've learned over 30-plus years of helicopter operations," Mike told Jake. "Not just technical procedures, but the thinking processes that keep aircraft safe." Mike's legacy project became a comprehensive guide to helicopter safety that combined military and civilian perspectives. The document covered everything from maintenance protocols to emergency procedures to accident prevention. "Most aviation training focuses on normal operations," Mike explained. "My experience has been with abnormal operations. What happens when everything goes wrong? That's where the real learning occurs." The guide became a standard reference for helicopter safety training programs across the country. Mike's unique perspective, combining combat rescue experience with civilian maintenance expertise, provided insights that weren't available anywhere else. "What you've created is a bridge between military and civilian aviation," Jake told him. Your experience in both worlds gives you a perspective that's invaluable for safety. Even in retirement, Mike continued his involvement with helicopter safety and emergency training. His expertise remained in demand for accident investigation, safety program development, and advanced training. The aircraft may change, the technology may improve, but the fundamental principles of aircraft safety remain the same, Mike told a group of young mechanics and pilots. Attention to detail, systematic procedures, and understanding that lives depend on your work. Mike's influence on helicopter safety extended far beyond his direct training and maintenance work. The pilots he trained went on to train others, creating a multiplier effect that improves safety throughout the aviation community. Every helicopter that lands safely benefits from the knowledge and experience of people like Mike, noted aviation safety expert Dr. Patricia Williams. His contribution to civilian aviation safety is immeasurable. Years later, when Mike's full military record was declassified, the aviation community learned the complete scope of his service. The 47 rescues he had mentioned were only the documented operations. His actual rescue count was significantly higher, including classified operations that couldn't be officially acknowledged. I had no idea of the true scope of Mike's military service, Jake told reporters covering the story. 47 rescues was just what he could talk about. The real number of lives he saved was much higher. Mike's military decorations included multiple air medals, a Bronze Star, and a Distinguished Flying Cross, awards that reflected the extraordinary nature of his rescue operations. Mike never mentioned his decorations, noted Captain Martinez. He was more interested in preventing future emergencies than talking about past heroics. The aviation community's response to learning about Mike's full background was one of profound respect and gratitude. "We always knew Mike was special," said FAA Inspector Chen, "but learning the complete story of his service helps us understand why his contributions to civilian aviation safety have been so significant." Mike's influence on helicopter safety continued long after his retirement. The training programs he developed became industry standards, and his approach to aircraft maintenance influenced safety practices nationwide. Mike's legacy isn't just about the people he rescued during his military service, observed aviation historian Dr. Robert King. It's about the civilian lives that have been saved because of the safety standards he helped establish. The Skyline Aviation hangar became a pilgrimage site for helicopter professionals seeking to learn from Mike's experience. Even in retirement, he continued to share his knowledge with those who could benefit from it. "The most important thing Mike taught us," Jake reflected, "is that helicopter safety isn't just about following procedures. It's about understanding why those procedures exist and what happens when they're not followed." Mike's approach to aviation, combining technical expertise with operational experience and an unwavering commitment to safety, became a model for professional excellence in the helicopter industry. For 20 years, Mike Sullivan repaired civilian helicopters with meticulous care and uncompromising standards. To most clients, he was simply an exceptionally skilled mechanic who never let an aircraft leave his hangar unless it was perfect. They never knew that their trusted mechanic was a decorated pararescue specialist whose expertise had been forged in the crucible of combat rescue operations. They never realized that his obsessive attention to aircraft safety came from experience where mechanical failure meant watching people die. That young pilot noticed his emergency landing procedures were at combat rescue level, and that observation led to a discovery that transformed both their understanding of aviation safety and their commitment to preventing the emergencies that Mike had spent his military career responding to. Mike Sullivan never stopped saving lives. He simply changed methods, from rescuing people when aircraft failed to preventing aircraft from failing in the first place, from pulling pilots out of crashed helicopters to keeping helicopters from crashing, from combat rescue operations to civilian safety training. Some heroes rescue people from dangerous situations. Others prevent dangerous situations from occurring. Both forms of service are essential, and both require the kind of expertise that can only be developed through years of experience where lives depend on getting it right. Now I ask you, have you ever encountered someone whose dedication to safety seemed excessive until you learned about their background? Someone whose standards were higher than the job required because they understood the true cost of failure? Share their story in the comments, because here at Human Stories, we believe the most important heroism often happens quietly, preventing emergencies rather than responding to them. If this story touched you, like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe. Until we meet in the next story, and remember, the most valuable expertise often comes from those who learned it when failure meant everything.